Hello and welcome to another My NT/ND marriage video. And in this video I'm going to be talking about date night. Date nights, plural. So Counsellor Sue had suggested that we do date nights, that we set aside a Sunday or a Friday or something and go on a date and just have time with him and I. So let's take it back to the beginning. When we were first together and I moved in with him, I loved the fact that we were going on dates. He was one of the first guys that took me to restaurants where you have, an entree, a main, a dessert, a little bit of wine with your meal. I hadn't really experienced that before him. So he introduces me to that, and I think that's really fine, It's like a little bit of pampering and spoiling, and I just thought it was pretty special. Granted, we didn't talk a lot on our date nights. Not personal topics. We didn't talk about, say, likes and dislikes in the bedroom, things we like with regards to love and affection and things like that. It was more him talking about his work and me talking about mine, sort of perfunctory types of topics. And he would want to hold my hand across the table, which I also thought was pretty sweet. Though fundamentally it was almost like just going out on a date with my brother, for all of the lack of intimacy involved in the date. He didn't compliment me, for example. So, I would do myself up and wear a nice outfit and things like this, and he wouldn't say anything. And I remember thinking, that's unusual, but it is what it is. At the start, I was so taken with going to restaurants, I don't think I was really paying attention to much else. He took me to see Cats, the musical, and I remember being so excited. I just couldn't wait to see it. I'd wanted to see it for a long time. And I wore this really cool, special red dress and everything, and he didn't compliment me. He said something about how other people might think the dress is nice, or are going to think the dress is nice. But that was as close a compliment as he was going to give me himself. However, while we were there watching the show, he was making these random remarks about how flexible the girls were, because they're being cats, obviously, and what they might be like in bed and things like this. And I'm sitting there next to him in my stunning red dress while he's talking about visualizing sex with the ladies on stage. And he hasn't complimented me. He hasn't said anything really sweet or nice or anything like that. And I remember just feeling really flat and just thinking, this just doesn't feel fun or romantic. I guess thwarted expectations. I sort of thought the date would go a very specific way, or not very specific, but a certain way, and that didn't happen. So I felt very flat after that date. It wasn't the wonderful experience that I had hoped it would be. And since our dates were turning out to be that way, where he wouldn't compliment or be really flirty or affectionate or even treat me like a lover, it was more like a roommate, they started to get a little bit dull. After a while, I didn't really enjoy the dates. Towards the middle years, it was a definite distinction that I noticed, that our dates revolved around food. It was pretty much all we did. We would just go to restaurants, or we would go to the movies where you order food, or we would go for food and then go to the movies. It was always just about food. And I can understand that you get all manner of people with nothing in common, but what's the one thing all people have in common? We eat. And so that was how dates were working for us. They were about food because the both of us had that in common. And we'd go to nice restaurants and try all different sorts of places, and they'd be really lovely or not, and we'd critique them and talk about how good the food was or the service or that kind of stuff, but still nothing really romantic. And after some time, we must have had conversations about the lack of affection and connection and flirting and such during dates. So then hubby interpreted that to mean making crass statements about sex with me on dates. And it would get worse if he drank. So he'd start talking, for example, about wanting to pound me. And I'd say, I'm not a piece of meat. Or shag, and I'd say, I'm not a piece of carpet. And I would start to feel really cringy because I thought that's not actually like flirting, not what I had in mind in any case. And they were the reasons why the dates stopped. Because I found going on dates with him and his cringy talk and just being about food, and of course he's making negative statements about my weight on top of this, as well as not complimenting me and things like this. And so I would sit down and we'd be eating and I would just feel like a porker, you know, just be like a pig in mud. It was just kind of unfun, you know, really unromantic. And so eventually dates just died in the bottom. Sue says we should instigate them again. So we go to the movies. And while we're at the movies, we're watching a funny movie and I'm laughing. And he says, "Can you stop laughing? You're embarrassing me." And he says it in a really harsh tone that I just cannot match. And I just sank. Then I was like, oh, that was a bit crushing. So the rest of the date was me being quiet. So you can picture that mood, yeah. And then another date we go on, which was years later. He orders some food to come into the cinema with us. And I'm just picking at bits and pieces of the food. And after a while he says, "Can you stop eating?" And again I felt like, you know, 10-ton Tessie, like what? And so I stop eating and I'm glum again because I'm feeling like somewhere in there was an insult, you know, it's definitely not a compliment. And so we tried what Sue was saying going on our dates and they weren't really working. We weren't really connecting. We still didn't talk affection, intimacy, romance. It was still like going out with my brother or a housemate, except that he would want to hold my hand as we got close to the venue, not before, which is another thing I needed to add. When we walk, he always walks 1.5 meters in front of me. He doesn't walk with me at all. It's like, what? And again, on another date, he was doing that. And I just stopped walking. I just stood there. It was like, nope. He's walking away and I thought, wonder how long it'll take him to notice that I'm not near him. And he's about 3-4 meters away when he turns and sees that I'm not there. And so he stops and he beckons me over and I just shook my head. And he comes back up to me and I said to him, "We've talked about this so many times. You know I don't like when you walk off on me. If we're going on a date, I want you to walk with me, beside me, especially if I've got awkward shoes on. I want him to be there so that I can have that support, not him running off 1 mile down the road." So usually what happens is he's walking 1 mile off down the road and then just as we get to the venue, he'll stop and reach out and try to hold my hand. And to me it feels super fake, like he's just trying to look good in front of everybody because why weren't you holding my hand before? And then we get in and he'll want to hold my hand across the restaurant. But if we go to the movies, he doesn't want to do anything like that. He will be sitting in his spot, glued to the screen, and I'm in my spot. He doesn't reach over, doesn't hold my hand, doesn't hug me, doesn't sneak over for a kiss, nothing like that, nothing. It's like he went out with a housemate, as I keep saying. One of our most recent dates, we'd gone out for drinks. I'd recommended that we go to a nice local pub so we can have a few drinks, listen to some music, and I can watch the people because I love watching people. And he's not holding my hand, he doesn't compliment. We're not doing anything that's even remotely couple-ish. And when we left, he walked meters ahead again, even though I've asked him not to. And as he's walking, we see this couple walking towards us, and they're like full embrace. They're like locked into each other. And he stops and he turns to me and says, "Do you want to hold my hand?" And I said, "No, we're nearly at the car. There's no point." And he interpreted that as me being angry with him. And so when we got home, he wasn't talking to me. He just stopped talking. And he explained to me later that he stopped talking because I was angry at him. A little while later, he talked to his friends, and they had said to him she should explain her expectations before she goes on dates. If she wants you to be flirty and hold her hand and yada yada yada, then she should be telling you that. And I said to him when he reiterated this to me, you know, I've told my friends and they agree with me, you know, that kind of thing. I said to him, "Oh, and so did you tell them that we've already talked about this so many times already?" And he's like, "Well, you know." But I was actually really shocked and miffed that that's what his friends would advise. Like, it's not stock standard that you go on a date and you hold your partner's hand and you compliment them and you flirt and you talk and like, what? Am I missing something? Am I the only one who got that memo? So yeah, I was a bit miffed when he told me that. I was like, who are these people? Don't talk to them, they're terrible. They give bad advice. The hardest part, I guess, is that he doesn't really remember the things that we talk about. And as much as I hate to say this after making my last comment, but his friends have a point in that I would probably need to reiterate it each and every time before a date. You know, as we go on that date, remember to stay near me and hold my hand. Remember to compliment me and flirt and stuff like that. I mean, it feels a bit killjoy as I say it, but maybe that's what somebody on the spectrum would need. If you're on the spectrum, let me know your thoughts. What do you think would be a good way to handle date nights? And so this is why the date nights had stopped, because even though Sue had recommended that we do date nights because they were going to bring us closer together, unbeknownst to all of us, he was autistic. That wasn't going to work. We didn't know that at the time, obviously, but it just didn't work the way that I imagined Sue had imagined it would work. And so look, it was worth a try, obviously. Sue's gonna recommend these things. Counsellors probably have some fairly stock standard things they recommend to each couple, but in our case, it didn't really work. And how about yourself? Date nights. Are they great? Are they fun? Are they wonderful? Have you found certain things you can do together that you have a blast and have in common? Or are they a little bit more like mine, where you find that you've just kind of gone out with your brother or your housemate and they're a good friend, they're a good companion, they're good company, but it lacks that intimacy and connection? Leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I really appreciate it.